Hello, I'm Ronnie Eldridge. Welcome to Eldridge and Company. The playwright and psychotherapist Clare Coss writes about strong women, and the award-winning actress Kathleen Chalfant plays them. They sometimes work together to tell inspiring stories about amazing women. Their latest collaboration is Dr. Du Bois and Miss Ovington, and it's Miss Ovington, not Ms. Ovington, and soon to open off-Broadway, and they're my guests today. And hello, both of you.
Hi, Ronnie. So great to be here.
So you created, well, nobody created. Miss Ovington created herself, right? But you found her first?
I did. Woody King had commissioned me to write a play on Lillian Wald to celebrate the centennial of the Settlement House movement, and he wanted a one-woman play. And when I was researching that play, I found Mary White Ovington. I thought, why have I never heard about her before? She got a play to the theater there, the original theater, the Neighborhood Playhouse. And so I researched all of that, and I found the first woman to dedicate her life to anti-racism in the 20th century. She was amazing. I thought
Actually, the first white woman. Right?
Yeah,
we
the
have
first
to
white
say
woman, yes.
the race.
Yes,
Yeah.
the white woman. And she, I just knew I had to write about her, which I did. I wrote a one-woman play on her called Dangerous Territory, which Kathleen actually read at the Zora Neale Hurston playwriting series at the New Federal Theater.
So, do you feel you're her?
No, I wish I could be her. She's one of those women that, you know, they talk now about aspirational models.
Yeah.
Well, Mary White Ovington
Yeah.
was an aspirational model, fearless, brave. She went places where no one else would go.
It's so interesting that people, I'm always interested in people, where do they get that moral, that core of strength and principle? And some people don't have that. Doesn't that
You know, I think
fascinate?
it helped in her case, and in my case, she was brought up a Unitarian, went to the Second Unitarian Church in Brooklyn, had a very radical minister, even for Unitarians, which is saying a lot. And that was what politicized her as
that
a young
interesting?
person.
And her family, were they
And
of
her,
the same?
she was the granddaughter of Connecticut abolitionists, and she had a great history on the wall. They had the Emancipation Proclamation on the dining room wall, and they had, you know, all kinds of memorabilia about the emancipation, and she just couldn't do anything but work for people.
So she was born in the late 19th century?
Yeah, she was born in
Right.
1858.
And did she go to college and things like that?
Yeah, she went to Packer Collegiate
Mhm.
for 2 years in Brooklyn, and then she went to Harvard for 2 years. And then she had to stop because of the Depression of 1893. Her father couldn't afford to send her anymore, so.
Well, reading about her also, I mean, this was an incredible time, and she was interested, if her family came from the abolitionists, and she was interested in the question of race, but she was also a feminist.
She
A
was
suffragette. Yeah.
She was a feminist. She was and she was a socialist. She was very left, and she was an amazing woman. She was just truly an amazing woman. But she read The Souls of Black Folk in 1904 by W.E.B. Du Bois, and then she wrote to him, and this is what got her completely on the track of anti-racist work. And she went down to Atlanta. She met him. They became very close. They corresponded, and it was at the time of the race riots in St. Louis in 1908, where white mobs ran into the black neighborhoods and started just lynching people and killing people, and it was just a horror. And it was the hometown, Springfield, Illinois, Abraham Lincoln's hometown. And she read an article by William English Walling in a Radical magazine that said, "Race war in the North." And she thought, and he said in this article, where is a large and powerful group of people to come to the aid of the Negro? How can this be? And she said, and to the aid of our country, she said out loud. And she wrote to him right away and said, let's meet, let's start an organization. And that was the impetus for starting the yes.
NAACP. And that whole history is so interesting, isn't it? With the fact that they were white people and Negroes, as we called them then, together. But that was one of the issues in your play.
Yeah,
it
was always a very difficult issue,
Yeah.
because white philanthropists were happy to be philanthropists, but there was still a color line. And one of the issue that's dealt with mostly in the play is Du Bois' insistence that he won't be treated as anything but an equal. And as we find in the play, they picked the wrong person to try to control. And Miss Ovington was in sympathy with him. She believed in him. But her conflict was that on the one hand, she knew he was right. And on the other hand, she felt that this organization, the NAACP, was the only hope both for bringing peace to the country and, in a way, bringing decency in an odd way to the souls of white people. At one point in the play, she says, white people need revolution to ignite our humanity, to let us move beyond silence and indifference. And she, early on in the play, says, you know, white indifference is the worst.
Right. She the executive director then of the
Well, she was a sort of, in 1915 she was acting chair. She took whatever position needed to be taken. She had a small inheritance that she lived on, so she wasn't paid, so she gave full time, and whatever job needed to be done. So over the years she held every executive position.
so
The play takes place in the 5th year of the NAACP's existence. So Dr. Du Bois and Miss Ovington have been working together for 5 years, and they have a great deal of respect and trust for each other, and they both believe that it should be an interracial organization because the abolitionist organizations in the 19th century were white run to help the Negro, but they were very clear about if we don't work together and learn how to, you know, understand each other, we're never going to make any progress. We have to work together.
Were women active in the as active as the men? I mean, is it at all comparable to the South in the 60s when the women complained that the men were running the organizations, you know, all the different civil rights organizations down there? Did women have the equal ability to participate in the major decisions other than Ms. Ovington?
No,
I don't
that
think
you had to fight for you had to fight
Yeah.
for your position. It's another one of the issues in the
Right in the
that
ladder.
we talk about in the play.
Yeah.
That no, you needed, you know, people to type and decorate the office and behave nicely and try to make people speak nicely to each other. But the men believed that it was their organization.
Yeah, but there was one other woman that, May Nerney was her name. She was a white woman who was a powerhouse of taking care of things in the office. I don't think it allowed Miss Ovington to do all that she did. I mean, all that they did, we just can't believe it. We think, you know, we know activists. But
They were really.
they were like all over. They traveled the country. Miss Ovington did, Dr. Du Bois did, Mr. Joel Spingarn, all of them speaking all around the country to start branches. So by 1915, there were 56 branches
That's quite amazing.
and about 7,000 members, which is really awesome, you know.
He was publishing, they had a magazine,
The Crisis,
and he was the editor.
yes.
And that, in the play, that's really what's generated his decision to leave.
Yeah.
Right.
Because he wanted the Crisis to be a major political journal, not, you know, the sort of, as he says, he didn't want it to be a newsletter. It wasn't like reporting on things that were going on. He had major political points to make. And it's one of the places where Dr. Du Bois and Miss Ovington disagree, not that the crisis should be an important political organ, but whether or not it should be written entirely from the black point of view.
It's interesting.
And how you could make those two things come together. And another position that they have discussions about in the course of the play, and certainly did in the world, was pacifism, because Miss Ovington was a thoroughgoing pacifist, and Du Bois believed that while he was a pacifist by preference, he believed that the good that good would be done by allowing colored soldiers into combat duty should the country go into the First World War, and that was more important than the principle of pacifism. So what's a wonderful thing that Clare has done about the play is that these are complete human beings with complicated views, and they engage these views, and in a way, because they engage these views, you see them as equals. Yeah. The question of the color line and gender lines and all like that are dealt with in front of your face.
Did she think that his writing from the black point of view was strident? No.
No. What she was trying to do was to find some common ground with the board. Probably she was actually entirely in sympathy with everything he had to say. Right. But it's wonderfully written. It's one of the best parts of the play, where she's trying to make this case that she's not entirely convinced of, but she does it as best she can. In a way, it's her version of the pacifist, conscription issue. Because for her, the organization has to survive, and this is a day, on this day, at this moment, the whole thing could go up in smoke, because what happened the day before, there was a horrifying board meeting in which all the executive committee, all the powerful white people behaved as badly as they possibly could.
I thought it was interesting, too, that it was a Sunday.
That they meet on a Sunday.
Yeah. It was Sunday afternoon. It was quiet in the office.
Yeah, right.
They were there.
They
and
think
it was all
they'll be
together.
alone.
Yeah.
Right.
And then we have the question of lynching, which also was brought up. And you've also written a play about, Emmett Till. Yeah.
Right.
But before we get to that, when you write a play, you find a character, and you then do a lot of research about it?
Yes, I did enormous research for this play, and then I have to cull so much of it out and get to the relationship between them. And I must say, Du Bois and Ovington were visionaries and activists, and Kathleen is a visionary and an activist, and Tim Simonson, who's playing Du Bois, it is so wonderful to watch. It's an adventure. The rehearsals for me are an adventure to watch them discover and deepen and find things in the script I didn't even know were there.
Well, that's what I wanted to ask you. So then you have a role to play. How do you approach that? Do you also do the research, and how do you become this person?
I find actually that doing too much research can be a problem, because the job is to play the character in the play and to play those relationships. And you find yourself, if you've done lots and lots and lots and lots of research, writing the play that you might have written had you had all this information. So in this case, I've done some research about Miss Ovington, and I had the advantage of having done a reading of Clare's other play, so I knew about her. But the issue at hand, and especially because we don't have a lot of rehearsal time, the issue at hand is making this relationship real and make it happen in front of people, so that in a certain way, the only thing that matters is what happens during that hour.
It's interesting. And do you have to spend extra time with Dr. Du Bois, Tim, to know him? I mean, to understand the relationship between the two of you?
We just are, you know, rehearse 6 or 7 hours a day.
So that's what it is.
6 or 7 hours a day, 6 days a week, ends up being a lot of time, and it's a 2-character play, so it's only the two of us.
Right.
They have a wonderful chemistry. I mean, they fight really well, and then they get so close, and you wonder what is going to happen.
Is that your imagination, or did you glean that from reading?
No, this is all
That's
factual.
there.
They had a very definite attraction to each other, and they also were trusted each other enough to really. Well, somebody wrote that she was the only white person that he felt he could let his hair down with and just really talk to. So that really gave me a lot to go on. You know, this play exists because Woody King Jr. of the New Federal Theater, which was founded back in 1970 and is dedicated to promote works for the theater from writers of color and women. He requested this play. That's why it
That's so
exists. 'Cause
interesting.
he said, I want that play. I want to play with Dr. Du Bois and Miss Ovington. And
Oh, good.
it was about, I was working on the Emmett Till play at the time, and I'd see him, he'd say, where's my play? And I think his persistence over those 10 years of asking for the play, it's just finally I said, okay, I'm going to write this play. And I so appreciate, you know, having a producer, you know, pursue me for a play, which now I'm so thrilled to see Kathleen and Tim in.
Such a champion, and our director was a young woman named Gabrielle. Well, I guess young. Everybody seems young to us. I don't know.
Come on.
Gabrielle is a grown-up person. Anyway, Gabrielle Kurlander is a wonderful, wonderful director, and the people who work around the new Federal Theater, our stage management and all the designers and all, are so
committed.
immediately and personally involved all the time. It's great.
Well, we have, I mean, these plays about race and all our concerns about it. Don't we still have almost the same difficulties?
Yes, we do.
And
Shall we consider the way our president is treated?
Totally, totally. So, I mean,
It's terribly current, even though this play takes place 99 years ago. We're still fighting for voting rights, gerrymandering, stop and frisk, you know, all of the things that the NAACP, that was very radical at that time, because this was the only organization to oppose all of the encroachments that happened with the Great Migration. Coming, you know, the black,
Right.
in 1910 when the organization was founded, 90% of black people lived in the South. And over those 5 years, the migration was happening, and so segregation hardened in the North. And so they were the only organization in the beginning to oppose this. And if you read their, you know, what they're dedicated to, it's like what we're all working on today, so necessarily.
you're so right when you said, look at Obama. I mean, just look at how the members of Congress have, just what they have to say, and the lack of respect.
They still imagine that they can, and that's what's so distressing. We talk in the play about the color line. The color line hasn't gone away. I think it's at its last gasp. You know, I think that
Yeah, I did do it.
most people don't think it's okay to talk that way. But those people are, it's like the last gasp.
It's an embarrassment to us. It's horrifying.
It's an embarrassment.
Yeah.
But that was the point, that this happens, but there has to be an opposition to it. And of course, the present day NAACP is doing that, and so many groups are doing that now, and the consciousness is there now, and I do think it is on the way out.
Yes, and shall we mention our mayor
Right.
and his family?
Yes, definitely. So
That's
more
the
and more.
future.
Yeah,
Right.
That's right. And more as we have different all kinds of people coming into the country. The mix is going to be so much richer and I think generous, I hope, right? So let's talk a little bit about Emmett Till, because you were also in that play.
I've done
Yes.
a number of readings of Clare's Emmett Till play.
Has that been produced on stage?
It just won a play contest at a new political theater in Tucson. And it's going to have its first production on February 22nd.
Oh, great. So
And
you're
it's been
busy.
produced in France.
And it had a reading in France. It's about white silence and responsibility. That's one major thread in the play. It's 3 stories interwoven: the Emmett Till tragedy and the tragic brutality, the worst horror.
When was that?
And that was 1955, August. And then his mother, who was a very privatized woman, but when she decided to have an open casket to show, she couldn't bear the reality of what they had done to his head. And I think it's because he insisted that he was a man. So they want to destroy the idea, because they didn't do any other, you know.
Yeah.
So, and this white school teacher, who was the teacher, I imagine she was the one invented character of the murderer and his wife, one of the murderers. And Kathleen has played that part so beautifully. It's like she can't live with herself because she heard the screams and didn't say anything. And how can she get these screams out of her head? She has to get to the point where she's going to have to speak. She has to do something. Take a step. Become responsible. And she played that. You played that so beautifully.
Oh, thanks. It's a wonderful. It was a wonderful part. The person there. It was a wonderful company. We did it a number of times, and Danny Glover was just
Uncle Mose.
And who was the mother?
Uncle Mose.
Who played
Linda
the-
Powell.
Linda Powell.
Oh, she's really, yes, very strong. So are we, does all your work come around this whole theme of what? Freedom, equality, justice? Are we, both of you, and me too, are interested in making the world a better place. I love that, because that's always been part of that's what I want to do. I don't know as I get older exactly how much I've done about that, but
Oh, you have done
where do we
so
get,
well,
I didn't
Ronnie.
mean it that way, but where do we, you got it from Unitarian Church, right? Where
Originally.
did you get this
I don't
conscience
know.
from?
I guess from you get it from your family. Paradoxically, my father, I was born in 1945, and by that time my father was moving away from Franklin Roosevelt and to the right and ended up somewhere to the right of Attila the Hun. But he was always a man of enormous decency and believed in justice. My mother was like us, you know. And I remember the first political act I remember is standing on a hillside outside San Quentin prison with my mother holding signs against the execution of Carol Chessman.
Oh,
So, but I have also lived a life of unending privilege. So who am I not to? I mean, I'm one of the lucky ones, and I think that, you know, you have to
give
Yes.
it back, and to say the wonderful thing that you know, the idea that no one got rich or famous. No business was built by itself. All of us who live a life of privilege are living a life of privilege on the shoulders of less fortunate people, people who have been good to us, kind to us, made it possible for us to do the things we do. So.
You know, once you get that consciousness and it really seeps in through all your pores, you can't live any other way. I mean, it's just on your mind every day.
When was your first moment of activism?
I guess the Vietnam War
Yeah.
was
Yeah.
when I really
Yeah.
charged out there. But
Right.
my first moment of consciousness, my mother was from New Orleans, and I was living in New Jersey, and I did not get Jim Crow
Right.
as a child.
Didn't make sense, right?
That's when I really,
Yeah. Knew what happened. How did the two of you meet?
In the street somewhere.
What do you mean in the street?
Marching around about something. We marched
we
around
met at
about things all the
demonstrations.
time.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we met at demonstrations.
Yeah.
And then we got to know each other when you did the Mary White Ovington
Yeah.
play.
Yeah.
Right.
How do you go to see Mary White Ovington and Dr. Du Bois?
It's the other way. It's Dr. Du Bois.
I know, I know.
Ovington.
Where do we
It's
go?
at the Castillo Theater, which is on West 42nd Street between 10th and 11th, and that's Castillo, Castillo, Castillo.
And but it's produced
By the new Federal
by the
Theater.
new Federal
It's
Theater.
New Federal Theater in association with Castillo Theater.
And when does it open?
The 17th of January to the 16th of February.
And then you go to,
Then I go to Tucson.
And where do you
February
go?
I go to the
22nd.
Manhattan Theater Club.
so you're so busy, that's so great. And when do you think the two of you will come back together again?
Oh, I don't know.
I don't know.
Soon, I hope.
I hope.
You better get to work, right? Well, thank you so much, and much good luck with this play. And the message, I guess, I mean, you're so hopeful about it, I think. Both of you really are.
We have
Yes,
to keep
Yeah.
at
yes.
it.
That's very good.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It changes not the way you think it's going to change, but it does change.
Well, on that note, thank you very much, both of you.
Thank you.
If there are any people you'd like to hear and topics you'd like us to explore, please let me know. You can write to me at CUNY TV, 365 Fifth Avenue, New York, New York, 10016, or you can go to the website at cuny.tv and click on Contact Us. I look forward to hearing from you.